Hello everybody. Today we're going to give you quite an in-detail overview of corporate immigration into Uganda. By watching this video, we hope that you will understand the basic rules of corporate immigration for Uganda. We know the video is a bit longer than usual, but I assure you it's worth it. So just stay tuned and make the best out of it. To make it a little bit more fun to watch, I asked Melissa here on my right to join me today. She's an expert in Uganda and has done some pretty impressive projects for some of our clients in Uganda. So to start straight away, so Melissa, to have an opener here, maybe as an opener, how would you rate the immigration the system of Uganda overall on a scale from 1 to 10 when it comes to liability and reliability, etc.?
Okay, so I would definitely rate Uganda a 9. Why I would rate it a 9 is because it's a pretty simple immigration system. Everything is quite reliable in comparison to other African countries, and also it's not a very complicated process at all. So Uganda is definitely in my top 3.
Okay, cool. So in Uganda, are there any industries or sectors that are exempt from or have more lenient immigration requirements, and where does one actually submit the applications?
So there aren't really sectors that are more lenient per se. I would say depending on the sector that you're applying under or the class that you're applying under, there are different requirements. And obviously if you compare a work permit for an NGO in comparison to a work permit for a normal employer, the documentation does vary a little bit, and the NGO would then require a bit more documentation.
Okay. So there's nothing special for oil sector, since Uganda obviously has massive oil fields. Okay.
No.
And what is the general quality of the adjudication? Are there lots of mistakes being made, or is it fairly reliable?
So I would say Uganda is fairly reliable.
Cool. Okay.
Definitely.
Okay. And what type, so let's maybe go into a little bit more detail now. So what type of visitors and short-term work visas or permits are available?
Okay, so in Uganda you usually have a standard entry permit. This is your visitor visa or business visa per se, that is issued for roughly around 90 days depending on where you're coming from or the passport you hold. And then they do have a short-term work permit that is known as a special pass, very similar to Kenya.
And how long is the special pass issued for?
So the special pass is issued for 90 days and it can be renewed for a further 90 days, but that is solely to the discretion of immigration who adjudicates the application.
And in practice, do they do it regularly, or is it, I mean, I know in Kenya they're a bit sticky around this extension, right, at least, and how is it in Uganda?
So in Uganda, I would say that they apply the same principle. They are a bit more sticky.
Okay. And are citizens from certain countries exempt from visitor and or short-term work visas? I mean, thinking about the Eastern African community, etc., is there maybe some special rules for some of the countries?
So not really. If you are exempted, it would only be for a visitor visa per se, but not when it comes to work. You would need to obtain the correct work visa in order to work legally in Uganda.
Super. And what are the typical activities allowed on a business visa or a tourist visa for business purposes?
So you can only enter on a business visa for business purposes like prospecting, conferences, etc. Tourist visas, you are not allowed to conduct any business, so please stick to your tourist visa as a tourist.
And then short term, I assume the usual distinguishing line would be third-party work, work in office of a branch or something. So because obviously in practice, always where's the line between business visas and where's the line crossed to short-term work? Maybe you can just explain that.
So I would always advise my clients, if it's your day-to-day activity, it's considered work. Anything outside of that, where it's full-on business meetings, then you can go into Uganda on a business visa. But if you're a consultant, for example, and your day-to-day is to have meetings with your client anyway, it's considered work.
Cool. Moving away a little bit from the short-term stuff now to the long-term work permits or passes, as they're called. So what type of work visas, permits are there available in Uganda?
So there's a large variety of work permits in Uganda, but these are all class specific. So it all depends on the sector that you're going to work in. So for example, if you're working for a registered NGO, it would be a class G1. But if you're going to work for an ordinary employer that's legally registered in Uganda, it would be a class G2. The G2 is typically our most popular work permit.
So ICT they don't have, but they have the G2, then you need a local entity, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
The entity must be legally registered in Uganda.
And then it's local employment?
Yes.
Okay. And how long is the G2, for instance, which is the most practical one, right? Or the one we use in practice the most. So how long is it valid for?
So you get a G2 from 6 months up until 36 months. So 3 years.
Okay, and are the government fees then different?
Yes, it depends on the validity of the permit you're requesting.
Okay. And in your practice, have we applied for lots of extensions of G2s?
So not from practical experience really, because a lot of the time the assignees are only going for the full 3 years, and we would apply for that from the onset.
And how long is the ideal lead time? I mean, in our practice, we always struggle with short lead times, right? So what's our ideal lead time for Uganda for, let's say, G2 work permit?
So I would say roughly around anywhere between 8 to 12 weeks. And this is because the processing time can take anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks. So like I mentioned in the beginning, it's a very reliable immigration system. So you will most likely get your work permit out in 6 weeks.
That's quite good.
Yeah.
Especially if we compare it to South Africa. Anyway, maybe just also in Africa, obviously we have two big differences, work and residence separation, or the work permit pass entails the residence. Which system follows, or does Uganda follow?
So Uganda is very similar to South Africa in this regard. There is only a work permit that allows for residence as well.
And then additional ID card, yes or no?
So there is an option for an additional ID card, but it's not compulsory.
Okay, but in Kenya it's compulsory,
yes,
right? Okay.
Correct.
Okay. All right, so what obligations does an employer, moving on to the corporate or the employer, what obligations does the employer have once the employment ends?
So the employer would need to notify the authorities that the assignee has left employment, and we can do that on their behalf by means of a cancellation of work permit application.
Okay. Then moving on to the family, maybe just the last 3 or 4 questions on the family. What options does Uganda offer, and what do applicants usually apply for when we talk about the family?
So typically when assignees bringing family members along, they would usually bring along their dependent spouse and children. So in this regard, the spouse would obtain a dependent permit, and the children, depending on whether they're going to school or not, would either obtain a dependent permit for non-school going and then a study permit for children attending school.
Okay. And who is considered a dependent? Because, I mean, some countries have quite a wide definition of dependent. Yeah. So would parents fall in there, or who is considered a dependent?
So typically not parents. It would usually just be extended to your spouse and children. However, there could be an exception if your parent is, for example, dependent on you financially and emotionally, and then you could add an additional motivation to their application. Or
frail care or something like
Correct.
that. Okay, yeah. Okay, fine. Then life partnerships, hetero and homosexuals, are they allowed in Uganda, or must you be married?
So life partnerships for heterosexual couples is permitted if you can prove that there is some sort of notarial agreement or agreement in the country of origin between the couple, but homosexual relationships are not regarded whether married or in life partnerships.
Okay. Then is there any fast track to permanent residence? I'm not quite sure how many people want to be permanent residents in Uganda, but is there a fast track option through the, work visa regime into permanent residence?
No,
okay.
So not in Uganda.
Okay. And then maybe last question really, are there any other red flags, any other practical stuff we should actually share with our viewers?
I would say that the one red flag, which isn't really a red flag for Africa, is that work permits are taking 6 weeks in comparison to the 2 to 3 weeks that they did before in terms of processing.
Okay.
I can say that, Uganda is quite a reliable immigration system. However, they do work on an online system like Kenya, so there can be certain delays with the system not working. But I think that they are quite on top of it in terms of the online system.
Cool. Well, thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
If you have any questions regarding Uganda, please contact us. You will find the contact details in below the video. I hope you found it very useful. If yes, then please share it and like it, and otherwise watch some of our other African immigration videos. Bye bye.